so I'm Taylor, and I'm going to be telling you about George Miller and his information processing theory. So his theory is something that is so easy to use in the elementary classroom, in middle school, and in high school. This is something we can use in our everyday life as teachers. And so his theory basically is comparing the human brain to a computer, which tells us that we take in information, we have to process it first, then our brain stores it, and then whenever it's needed, we retrieve it at a later time, just like a computer, how it actually stores stuff for us, and whenever we need it, we can pull it back out. So with this theory, he has two different parts, chunking and tote. So first we'll talk about chunking. So with his chunking theory, that means that we as humans can only hold 5 to 9 chunks of information at a time. So this is where he actually wrote a paper about 7 plus or minus 2, which in theory says 5 to 9 chunks at a time. So depending on your students, which you'll figure out how they learn, how their brain works, that is where we decide how many chunks that we should be giving at a time. So depending on what level of students that you have, that's where you decide, do I need to be giving 5 chunks, or can I go up toward 9, or do I need to stay in the middle? So a lot of information that I found of easily to make it into the classroom is do your whole group lesson, and then after that break off into smaller groups, and that's where you can decide if, hey, maybe you have some students that can only hold the 5 to 7 chunks. That's where you really build on those 5 to 7 chunks, make sure that they are really understanding it and they have it, and then throughout the week or throughout your lesson you keep building onto those chunks. Whereas you might have some higher level students that can hold the 7 to 9 amount of chunks. And so that's when in their smaller groups they can be doing different projects and researching more to build onto those chunks to create more knowledge on what you already taught. And then of course you're going to have some students that are right there at that 7 that they really do what you're working on in class. They can hold a little bit more, but maybe too much, doing all 9 different chunks will overwhelm them and they're not going to get it. So stick with what your students can what they need to know, and then build on it based on individual students, the amount of information that they can hold and actually remember and store and be able to use. But then he had a second part to his theory that's called tote. Tote means to test, operate, test, and then exit. And so with this, it's great to use in any type of class, especially when you're doing critical thinking, problem solving, so math, science, and it's great for group work. This basically means throughout your lesson, you're testing, you're operating to see if it's actually working. If it's not working, test again, and then eventually you'll exit. So as teachers, we can use this by doing our informal lessons throughout our lesson, or our informal tests throughout our lesson. So that will be like if we're doing our lesson and then we're seeing, okay, are students understanding this? If not, that's where we go back, do another plan, then test again until we realize that they're actually understanding the lesson. But then as students and as group work that we can do in critical thinking, problem solving, students can get together, have their question, test different theories, test ideas. If it's not working, they go back to the drawing board and then they keep redoing it. And then the exit part of this theory really just means once the students are understanding what you're talking about and are actually getting it, they're testing, they're doing great with it, that's when you exit the theory, or that's when you exit the lesson, because they actually have it, they've grasped onto it. The one thing I disagree with is also in his theory, he says that you can just exit completely if it's just not happening, but I think us as teachers need to try different ways so that students are going to get it, not just exit it completely. So only exit once our students have learned the answers. But then the tote theory also promotes teamwork, group work, and it also promotes that we all think differently and there might be more than one way to get to the correct answer. So that will really show how different groups have different answers, different ways to get to the answer. So with his theory, information processing, that's something that I feel like we should be using in our everyday classroom anyway. It's very informative, things that we should be doing based on our students' needs. I feel like we've learned this already. We just actually have a name to the theory that we're talking about. So with information processing, it's really just those chunks, giving them exactly what they need, the 5 to 9 chunks, depending on who can hold what amount of information, and building upon it. And then the tote, test, operate, test, and then exit once your students have the information.